Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, July 5th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you on this Tuesday. We dig into Julio Rodríguez and some barrel rate surgers. Eno had a great piece that went up before the weekend. Rodríguez among the players featured in that piece. Easy for me to say. We'll get to several of those players, talk about some other big movers among hitters who I think are going to be going much earlier in 2023 drafts or in the midseason drafts. I know some people have set those up on the side. That's where those exist. They live in the side space. Fantrax has them, but you got to set them up yourself and join them as private leagues. So good news if you're looking for them, they exist. Bad news is they're hard to find on a big scale. We'll talk about a few other topics, including trading for injured players, the challenges that come from trying to deal for someone like Bryce Harper right now, and maybe in hopes of having him back at the end of the season as someone that can make a very good team, an even better one, especially in head-to-head formats. And we'll get to some recent risers, including Brian Bayo, who's going to come up to the Red Sox, Harold Ramirez, who's playing more for the Rays, and the always confusing Triston McKenzie. How was your long weekend?
It was great. It was great. It was exactly what I needed. Because of COVID, I wasn't able to see my dad for Father's Day. So he came down. We grilled, as we discussed at the table. It is practically a requirement to grill on the 4th, I believe. So we grilled, as was our duty. And then we watched a stupid movie. We watched Independence Day 2, which was awful.
Yeah, I had no idea they made the movie, but as soon as you told me that's what you did, I just thought that probably wasn't good.
It was still kind of funny for us to sit around and laugh. There was just some really awful acting, some really bad writing. And it's not like the first one was like a critical masterpiece. It's just that it was not a second one. Like, at least it was kind of funny in its own way. So this one tried to be the exact same thing and missed awfully.
There's sometimes you watch something and you think, oh, yeah, the sequel is going to be great. And Independence Day was not one of those movies for me. That was not how I felt when I watched that movie 20 years ago.
I also took the kids back to the San Jose Giants and on Sunday night, and we had an absolute ball. Like, we just had a great time. The kids were doing all the bouncy house and the ball throwing stuff that they have outside. They have really good beer there. I had a friend of mine started Federation Brewing out here, and they've got Federation beers at the ballpark. The tacos were great. The only thing was it was a little bit crowded because it was fireworks night.
Right.
But I did get the ball in the hole at the sort of the command challenge that they have there. And I did hit for a cycle on the skee ball thing. So I am a true athlete.
Yeah, I think that's all the proof we need. No further questions.
But yeah, it was a really great time, and because of the pitch clock, it was like 2 hours, 2.5 hours at tops, and even with the fireworks, we got the kids home mostly for an okay bedtime.
I had a thought about the pitch clock. So before we get into the topics that I threw out there in the intro, I want to kick this your way. Do you think it's possible that while some people believe the pitch clock and speeding up pitchers could cause pitchers to get hurt more often, do you think it could really be one of those just no effect things, or maybe even a slight improvement on the current injury rate because guys can't throw their max if they have to make pitches more quickly?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about how this might end up happening. We have pitchers taking as long as they can between pitches in order to throw as hard as possible. If we limit that amount, the hope is the velo goes down. If the velo goes down, velo is the source of stress. It really is. The closer you throw to your maximum, the more stress you're putting on your elbow. So I have friends like Dr. Mike Son who will point out that that is not the only source of stress. The other source of stress is sort of chronic use and chronic, like often pitching close to your max. So let's say you pitched at 75% a lot, you'd still be stressing out your elbow. But it would be, I would say it's better than if you're throwing 90% all the time, So it's one of those things where I'm also like, hey man, are we doing really good on injuries? Are we doing really well on injuries right now? It's like, Like it already feels like every year we're like, oh, rash, unprecedented injury rate through the roof. I don't know. I don't think this one will change that trajectory at all. And I think there's an outside chance that it helps improve it by incentivizing pitchers to not throw as hard.
Yeah, I mean, your conditioning would need to be better, but I think part of sustaining your effectiveness with the pitch clock would be dialing it down just a little bit. So it crossed my mind, I think, at the end of last week. And I'm glad we've got something to be excited about, aside from the games being a little quicker, which, if you're covering the games, helps you. But depending on your situation, right? You bring a family to a game. Yeah, small kids don't want to sit there for 3 hours and 25 minutes. That's just not
Also,
going to
just like
happen.
the other type of pace of play, which is not just game length, but like how long between events.
Sure.
So there's just it's snappier, and my children are raised on screens, so they want. I don't know who to blame for that. Maybe me, but
I'm 37 years old. My attention span's getting shorter. Like, I'm not going to
yeah.
pretend like I'm immune to it.
There was a study that said that actually that everybody's attention span has gotten shorter in like the iPhone era.
Yeah, and this isn't just the elder millennial. Like, I think even my parents, like, their attention span is shorter than it used to be. So no more shaking your fist at clouds. I think there could be some good from the pitch clock on a few different fronts, and injuries might be one of them. But let's talk about the piece that you wrote that went up just prior to the weekend. You were looking at some barrel rate surgers, Julio Rodríguez among those players, and Julio's been a frequent topic of a few shows. I had Clay Link on as a guest while you were in Hawaii. At that time, he suggested on this very podcast that Rodriguez is a first rounder for him going forward. And then Todd Zola, who I spoke to going into the weekend on the MLB RotoWire fantasy show, said basically the same thing. So I'm kind of putting myself in this position of nodding along and saying, yeah, that sort of makes sense because Julio Rodriguez does everything that we want first round picks to do. Do you think it's fair to put a top 15 overall sort of valuation on Rodriguez based on what we've seen now in just about a half season of him in the big leagues?
I love the speed. I love the contact rate. I think that he can actually make some improvements in the strikeout rate. I think he can be a little bit more disciplined going forward than he has been. So there is still room for him to have upside beyond what he's done. I think he's going to end the season pretty close to 30-30, if not there. And maybe he has a season in front of him that could even be better, where he has a 330-30 season, which he probably won't do this year because he improves the strikeout rate. So I think, yes, I do want to point out that there is a slight similarity to another person in the first round that might be disappointing people a little bit this year. And that's Vladito. I've got this tweet here, and I'm looking at Vlad's numbers, and maybe I haven't checked in with him enough recently. I mean, he has 19 homers. I expect him to have fewer. He's projected to end it with 40 homers. Is he disappointing anybody? Anyway, he does share something with Vladito in that he hits the ball really hard, but his attack angle is not amazing. I've got this tweet from Tanner Stokey at Driveline that he was just putting on my piece, and he said that in June, when Julio Rodriguez was putting up these barrel rates that are so great, and said to me that it was about just basically being comfortable, put his A swing on the ball, and getting comfortable in the big leagues. He had a 75 grade bat speed. So, it's 20 to 80 scouting skill, 75 grade bat speed, bat to ball with 37 out of 80, swing decisions 44, 45. So average bat to ball, average swing decisions, elite bat speed, and his attack angle on a 20 to 80 scale is a 7. No, it must be his actual attack angle.
Yeah, I think he broke the 20 to
Devin's
80
not on
scale
the
with
20 to
7.
80 scale, but that's a lower attack angle. So I think in some ways some similarities to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. In some ways a little bit worse, because I would say that swing decisions for for Vladimir Guerrero is above 45, and in contact rate is above a 40. So I don't know, but he also doesn't steal bases, right? So how much are you willing? How many flaws are you willing to like look past for the stolen bases? This is the question.
Yeah, and I think these flaws in a player this young are probably more picking nits than looking at him and saying this is not going to work. I mean,
that's the ultimate title of this podcast, though.
Picking nits. Yeah, that took second when we named the show 3 years ago. A lot of people who were not on board with that one.
Yeah, right.
But Julio Rodríguez is a 140 WRC plus. I'm looking at a rookie leaderboard going back to 2010. So just all rookies going back about a dozen years now. Minimum 200 plate appearances. A 140 WRC plus puts him in the top 20 among all rookies during that span. Most of the players ahead of him had very, very good careers overall and are still even mostly early rounders where, timeline appropriate.
Who doesn't?
Who's bad on this list?
Yeah.
Well, Gary Sanchez isn't who he appeared to be at first. And that was a very, very small sample. That was 231 plate appearances.
Not a very similar player either.
No, but Yordan Alvarez is number one among rookie performances we've seen. Jose Abreu, not quite the normal rookie as a pro coming from Cuba. Yasiel Puig, Aaron Judge, Rhys Hoskins.
Puig is maybe the worst on this list.
Yeah, Puig took the spiral downward pretty fast. He set a really high bar and then just never really got back to it. Judge, Hoskins, Trout, Matt Olson, Tatis, Ohtani. Miguel Sano's on here for WRC plus in a half season, but it's a 35.5% K rate. I think people knew what his limitations were. Obviously didn't run. Luke Voigt's on here. Juan Soto, Grandal, Pete Alonso, Ronald Acuña Jr., Bo Bichette, Corey Seager.
Anybody that runs is still like a top 3 rounder.
But for most of those names, those are consistent early round players. Consistent early rounders. And then of all those players, only Mike Trout has more stolen bases among those rookies than what Rodriguez has now. And we're still going to see another 10, 15, maybe even 20 more.
Athleticism will help paper over some of the questions about swing decisions and power and contact. So I'm all systems go. It's all good. I don't think picking the Nets is the right move here. I think he's a first rounder.
I think there's a lot in terms of tools that are similar to Ronald Acuña Jr. I think one of the differences for Acuña is Acuña made better swing decisions upon arrival. 27.5% O-swing percentage for Acuña back in 2018 compared to that 36.7% that we're seeing right now from Rodriguez. Where that number goes in the second half probably determines where exactly in the first round Rodriguez goes. If that remains a problem, he probably stays more late part of first round, or at least back half of first round. If that gets better quickly, then we start talking about Rodriguez as a first half of round one sort of player.
Because Acuña did at some point, even though he started maybe with better swing decisions, he also then improved upon that. Yep. Like there was a big strikeout rate improvement. If we see a similar strikeout rate improvement from Julio Rodriguez, we're talking about a front of the. It is interesting to then talk about which one you would have higher, because Acuña is in his prime, and he obviously is stealing bases after the injury, and he has made an adjustment that we're still kind of hoping for from Julio Rodriguez. However, the fact that Julio Rodriguez might have an adjustment left makes you wonder if there's another level that could be further than Acuña. However, I'm a big present value guy, so I would have Acuña over Julio Rodriguez.
All right, so we're in agreement that Rodriguez is a top 15 player. I would have Acuña over Rodriguez today for the same reasons you do. I think the present value, the little bit of track record there, being a basically repeat first rounder, that would lead me to choose Acuña over Rodríguez if I were drafting for the second half, or if I were drafting even for 2023, which I get to do that in 3 months, not even less than 3 months. Something's wrong with me.
Eternally looking forward.
Something is just so wrong with me. But there is this sort of longer term question that I think is sort of impossible. And this happens every time we have a player who breaks out and looks like a perennial first rounder. It's, what do you do in a keeper league? If someone's trying to trade for Julio Rodríguez or offering you Rodríguez in a trade, like one of our listeners sent us one that was Luis Robert and Brandon Woodruff for Julio. And that's a 12-team head-to-head league, OPS instead of average, just to put a little more context to it. And the lean from the listeners, so from Chris, was to decline it. And I agreed. I thought Chris was right to turn it down, even though with Robert, you're getting a guy that has a lot of ceiling, who could be a 5-category player. The age difference, I think, is a factor here. And even though you're getting an ace for now in Brandon Woodruff, it's probably not an ace for 3 or 4 years. It's more like an ace for this year, next year, and then beyond that, who knows? It's pretty far into the future. I just think a player like Julio Rodríguez is almost impossible to trade. Tatis was this kind of player a couple of years ago before the injuries. Acuña was like that a few years before Tatis was, where you just can't get enough ceiling back in the return to justify trading such a young, already great player away for future value, because he's the player you were waiting for. He's the player you've tried to build around.
Yeah. And what I hear in that Woodruff trade is it was like a keep 5 or something.
Yeah, I think that might have been a keep 5.
It's always that's when you're like, okay, so I have to take the downgrade at the hitter in order to add Woodruff and try to win it this year. But you know what the other person is doing. They're just trying to upgrade that one of those keeper slots. There is almost no overpaying when it comes to like a keep 5. You could offer your whole team except for 2 or 3 players.
Right, because the elite of the elite young keeper is a lot more valuable, even if we're talking about players that are awesome right now. So I just think that's where I'm at. Rodríguez is almost impossible to trade and feel like you're getting fair value in the return for in multi-year leagues. Other players that you wrote about in the piece, Ryan Mountcastle. I am the perpetual Ryan Mountcastle skeptic, and I'm trying to really drill into why. I think you hit on it in the piece a little bit. 25.3% strikeout rate this season, 5.1% walk rate. And I'm wondering if I get caught in, let's call it the Sabermetrics 1.0 lens. Like, why am I so fixated on strikeout and walk rate when he does a lot of other things really well? I mean, Ryan Mountcastle hits the ball very hard. Did it in June, has done it for a long time. For the season, he's 9th out of 155 qualified hitters in barrel rate. I think I care more about barrel rate than I do about strikeouts and walks in general. There can be extreme examples. And I guess, is Mountcastle's plate discipline bad enough where I should be as skeptical about him as I am? He doesn't have threats to playing time. He does swing at a lot of pitches outside the zone, 6th highest O-swing percentage among those same 155 qualified hitters, which does, I think, lean more to the extreme. But you see Rafael Devers in that range. You see Bo Bichette kind of close in terms of O-swing percentage too. And those are consistent early round guys that I really like. So am I wrong to kind of push Mountcastle aside given the strengths that he has at the expense of a couple of flaws?
I think this is a perfectly terrible flaw to have. It's usually leads to bad outcomes. It's not a good move. I wrote a piece once about how there was a bunch of players that had they've never had. It was like a 6-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, and we didn't used to ever have players like that. And then all of a sudden we started having players like that in the juice ball era, because you could play really good defense and hit the ball really hard and just have awful strikeout to walk ratio. And the main player that I highlighted in that piece was Paul DeJong.
Yeah.
What's even crazier is that Paul DeJong at one point, it really improved his discipline at the plate. It just didn't hold. I look right now at the leaderboard. I have it sorted on Fangraphs qualified hitters for smallest BB decay. And guess what? Julio Rodríguez is 22nd on this list. But there are some interesting names on here in terms of like Luis Robert. He has the second worst BB decay ratio in the big leagues. But there's also just a bunch of names I want nothing to do with. Avisail Garcia right now is number one. This version of Avisail Garcia is not what I want on my team. Jonathan Scope is fourth. He's been one of the worst batters in baseball in the regular ones. Jorge Mateo is sixth. Michael Franco is ninth. Adam Duvall is like the patron saint of this statistic. He's 15th. I don't know. I think, listen, we just did a segment called Picking the Nits on Julio Rodríguez, and this is basically the nit I was picking. And he's on this list. Cody Bellinger's on this list. He didn't used to be on this list. I don't think it's not a good sign if you're on this list. I think, yes, you can be such a freak of nature, offensively in terms of having awesome tools, Bo Bichette, Luis Robert, like they have great tools and they're going to out-tool their way past this flaw. But I don't think it's good in the long run. Who's fifth in this is Javier Baez. And I know he probably has one more hot streak in him and maybe he'll be fine and his end of season numbers will look the way they always do. But at the same time, I thought that Javier Baez contract was one of the worst of the offseason, and there's no way I'd hitch my wagon long term to a player like Javier Baez. So a little bit of a difference maybe between dynasty and in season. In season, if the guy is showing plus defense and he's showing the ability to hit the ball hard, then the BBK doesn't matter as much. But if you're talking about keeper leagues, it does matter a little bit more. So, Bobby Witt is on this list right ahead of Julio Rodríguez. The question you have to ask yourself, and Bo Bichette is there, the question you have to ask yourself is, when will this become a problem and will they improve upon it? Those are the two questions you have to ask.
And I would say this is very comparable to what we see from Randy Arozarena too. Mid-20s strikeout rate, sub 6% walk rate. But the key difference with these two players, Arozarena runs a lot, Mountcastle only runs a little. You're going to get 3 to 5 bags in a typical year from Ryan Mountcastle. And then I think comparing him to younger guys like Rodriguez too, the age difference is a factor, but also defensive value is a factor in the long run. It's less of a concern.
Yeah, that's definitely this is less of a concern if you're the shortstop and center fielder, 100%.
Yeah, I think the situation in Baltimore for now is fine. I just think this could be the kind of thing that turns faster than you'd think for Mountcastle being the kind of player who does a lot of things well. I worry that he's just too much like a CJ Cron or a Christian Walker. And I'm looking at Walker again. Walker has had a weird season. Walker strikes out less, 19.4%. He walks more, 12.5%. He swings at pitches outside the zone a lot less, 24.8%, a really good O-swing percentage. Right now, it's a 181 BABIP for Christian Walker. And I know the type of player he is. He's not the kind of guy that's going to live with a high batting average on balls in play, but that's probably a solid 100 points off of where he should be based on the way he hits the ball. I'm looking at this and I'm just saying, okay, even though the projections see more batting average rest of season from Ryan Mountcastle than they do from Christian Walker, I see the same kind of things that worried me about Walker earlier in his career are there for Mountcastle right now. Doesn't mean Mountcastle can't become more patient. Right. I just see a more replaceable big league player that does one thing well, but a lot of things not particularly well. And I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing something in how he hits the ball that actually makes him more stable than some guys that might strike out less or might reach less often.
It doesn't have as stream of an attack angle as Christian Walker. So, Christian Walker has that 48% fly ball rate. Last year, Mountcastle was at 43. This year he's at 36. I do kind of like when I look at a guy and he has the same amount of ground balls as fly balls. There's something that I like about that. It's an anecdotal thing, but I think it also just speaks about having an attack angle that's not extreme. And we saw with Julio Rodríguez, his is a little bit closer to extreme on the low end. And I think with Walker, what you're seeing is that's extreme on the high end. And the nice thing about being a streamer on the low end, if you still hit the ball hard, you can still hit 20 to 25 homers, and you're going to hit for a good batting average. And so I guess maybe Mountcastle is in that good range where has a high enough attack angle to hit homers, and it's low enough that he's not going to hit 230. So I guess that's what makes him good. You know, I do think that at some point the poor swing decisions are going to come for him. He's 25. You know, I'm not sure I would want him on my team when he's 30, 31.
But
That's the question too, with that leaderboard I was telling you. It's like, you know, you got to throw age on there. You know, Avisail Garcia is maybe one of the more people to be most worried about on it because he's 31 years old and he's still rocking that. And you know that those tools are just going to fall off in terms of when you look at aging curves for things like running speed, a fastball velo. You know, defense, in terms of the athletic, the things that depend the most upon athleticism, they age the worst. So that's why you like to have somebody who has a good BB to K, right? Like you have somebody who has a good sense of their knowledge of the zone, then they can still give you, you know, good stuff when they aren't running as fast and they aren't playing as good defense. So Mountcastle being on this list, you know, without having those athletic traits, I think is a little bit worrisome. He's not like a primo dynasty asset, I don't think.
No, but if you're in a league full of like-minded players, he could become undervalued. That's the part I'm trying to get right. Is I'm trying not to throw out the things he can do along with the things that he doesn't do, because I think that's when you can start to make some mistakes. But if you said, would you rather be generally into this group of players or not into this group of players, the guys who are low on terms of their BB to walk rate, I would avoid this group as a whole if I had to make a yes or no sort of decision about them. Yeah, I would miss out on a handful of guys that I like. I mean, sure, Randy Arozarena is a good player, but he's a guy
you
that
would
I'd be
miss out on
skeptical
Julio Rodríguez, dude. Come on now.
Now, yeah, but this is old guys on this list, especially though. Those are the guys that I'm not panicking about Brendan Marsh, but I think it's fair to watch carefully and see where the plate skills go in the second half.
Yeah, I'm not as excited about Brandon Marsh as I was at the beginning of the season. Like, I'm glad that his defense is keeping on the field, and it is good defense, but they don't always play him in center field, and the BBK is not good.
Yeah, gives me a little bit of worry about Bo Bichette, I guess, if you look at this, but at the same time, like, I'm going to pick my spots. I'm just going to be very careful with what I choose from this group because that's a flaw that I generally don't want to have. And if I have it in one or two bats, that is plenty. I don't want this up and down an entire roster. One other player that you wrote about, I think, is
I do want to one last point about this. It's interesting. There's a little bit of a difference between Luis Robert and like Starling Marte, the way that they get to a low BBDK versus even Mountcastle. Because Robert is like a 19% strikeout guy with a 3% walk rate. Starling Marte, 18% strikeout, 5% walk rate. That's just like a prototype of player that I can almost get with. You know what I mean? That's like a free swinging super hit tool guy, right? I can almost handle that. You know, what I don't want is low contact rates and low walk rates.
Right. Yeah, both. Like, and that's where I think Mountcastle's on that borderline. That's why I've generally stayed away. And when he's good, I miss out. And when he's just kind of mediocre, then I'm not.
And he's pretty streaky.
I'm not sweating it.
He's pretty streaky.
I think you're right about that too. It's what got his name in the article that you wrote. He's had an amazing June. But Dylan Carlson was in that piece as well. He appears to be figuring it out. And I mean, given his age and being a guy that debuted in the pandemic shortened 2020 season, being patient with Dylan Carlson made some sense. I think if you look at the overall slash line for the season, it still doesn't jump off the page. He's at 255, 318, 418 entering play on Tuesday. But we're seeing more hard contact here recently, running a little bit as well. It kind of looks like a big second half might be just around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing what you want all these other players to do, what you want Julio Rodríguez to do, what you want Bobby Witt to do. I think Bobby Witt is doing it a little bit. Rodriguez, he's not necessarily improving his reach rate, his chase rate as much as it might seem. He's still keeping the chase high. What Carlson did was improve the chase rate, hit the ball harder, and lift the ball more. It's just like, oh, good. You did the three things that would make you break out. The one thing that kind of kept me from sort of anointing him, the sleeper of the article, or like the reason we do this, is his barrel rate, improved barrel rate, because he hit 0 barrels in April.
Not good.
His improved barrel rate was 6%. And when I read that, I'm like, okay, we've got like a 15 to 20 homer hitter on our hands. Now, I wrote that in the article, and then there was an impassioned defense of Dylan Carlson's power ceiling. And I realized that I hadn't said this season. So I am limiting Carlson's upside this season to 15 to 20 homers. My question to you is, where do you think his power ceiling lies beyond that? We're talking about a 23-year-old switch hitter with good plate discipline. And now that I'm looking at it, good but not great power numbers in the minor leagues. Not consistently great power numbers in the minor leagues. He could still end up only being a 15 to 20 homer hitter.
Yeah, I think the tricky things here, if you look at max exit velos, they're not eye-popping. Usually you're looking for that. You're looking for the guy that does massive damage when he finally gets a hold of one.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really
He's
seeing
average-ish. Yeah.
that. Kind of average there.
Yeah.
Barrel rate for his career right around league average too, right? He's 6.6% for his career. He was higher in previous seasons than he is so far this year.
Technically, league average is around 5, but when you're talking about like a starter, it's
like
more
players
like,
we care about. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of makes him what you said he is for the second half as a long-term ceiling, unless you project more based on his size. And I think being a switch hitter, I think, would also be a factor. I think you'd want to give Dylan Carlson more time because he's got 2 swings to adjust.
Yeah,
He's got 2 approaches that he has to build through. So I think it'd be harder to forecast it based on the numbers because of something very rare and unique about him. But would I confidently say I expect more than a 25 home run season at his peak? Not based on anything I've seen so far.
Yeah, he's shown the most growth, power wise, versus lefties this year. He's been pretty steady at kind of like a 175 ISO against righties. That's interesting because you get fewer plate appearances against lefties, and that your split against lefties is always going to be more up and down, But at the same time, maybe what you're saying is true. Like maybe he's just getting his righty swing right. I bet you he has like a season with 25 or something, but I think that generally we're not talking about a power hitter here. It just doesn't look like it. I don't see the signs. I think he's a good disciplined hitter, and he'll consistently be sort of 5 to 10% above average, in terms of WRC plus, in terms of how he hits. But it's not always going to be a great one for fantasy leagues. You know what I mean? Like, especially if he steals like 8 this year and then he steals like 4 next year. Like think of if you're in like a 12-team keeper league and you've got a guy who's, most likely going to hit like 280 with 18 homers and 5 steals a year. I mean, and he has work to get to 280. You know what I mean? Like his career batting average is 255. Let's say you're talking about a 260 hitter that's going to hit you 18 homers and steal 4 bases a year. How long do you want to hold on to that for the upside that he might hit 25 one year?
It's a fair question. I guess the comp that I come up with in terms of what I think the ceiling might be, what if the ceiling is Brian Reynolds? Which is not bad. That's a good player.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Because Brian Reynolds debuted at an age that Dylan Carlson hasn't even reached yet.
Yeah.
Carlson's been in the big leagues for parts of 3 seasons. So they're both switch hitters. They're both not necessarily guys that are overwhelming in any one category, although I would argue that a 300 batting average these days is kind of like the equivalent of popping 35 home runs.
But I do think that's attainable. That's almost more attainable than like 30 homers for Carlson, like a 280, 300 average, because you can see these great strikeout rates in the minors. Right now, he has an 18% strikeout rate. If you just add a little bit more power to his current line, he could be a batting average asset.
All right, so we solved it. So Dylan Carlson is probably more like a Brian Reynolds type player than, I don't know, than a superstar, but that's
we're also
not
talking
a bad
about
player.
ceiling. I think he has a Brian Reynolds type ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
He has to do some work to get there.
Yeah, probability of him getting there, I think, is a whole another matter as well. I want to talk about some other players, though, that are big movers among hitters. And I think Yordan Alvarez became front of mind yesterday because he hit his first career walk-off on the 4th of July. I think he's got a first-round
It was
future.
his first career walk-off?
Yeah, so he's first with the Astros. Maybe he had some in the minors or something.
That's crazy.
So I think he's a first-rounder. I don't know if he's gotten as much attention as a future current first-rounder as he probably deserves. He's already played 31 games in the outfield this year.
Well, how many first rounders do we have now? 30?
30, at least. We're playing in 30-team leagues. No, I think he's in.
I think all right, so Kyle Tucker is definitely out?
Probably.
Who else was borderline for us? Is Mookie Betts out?
No, Mookie's still in. Yeah, you're right. I got 30 first rounders. Those are the rules.
No, listen, I'm just kidding. I think we got to take Kyle Tucker out. Although I love him, right? He's hitting 260, 16 homers, 14 steals. He has a shot at 30-30 this year.
I think the problem here, I think the extra value we keep tacking on to steals is taking guys like Alvarez, who should be first rounders, and peeping them out for some. But he's on his own planet as far as what he does as a hitter. He's up in that Soto level in terms of just how good he actually is at hitting baseballs. Like, you can't tell me that Vlad Jr. was fine in the early part of round 1 in 2022 and that Yordan Alvarez doesn't have a spot there, right?
Yeah. It's just hard for me because there are these things sometimes in fantasy where, like, intellectually you're like, yeah, I got it. I understand. Like, Chad Green can be a good reliever on my team without saves. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where, like, if you do the analysis, you look at the end of the year, there are relievers that are worth money that didn't give you saves, and maybe you should roster them because they gave you production. But then when you're actually, like, building the team, you're like, I'm not really gonna pick Chad Green. You know what I mean? Like, am I really gonna do this? There's a guy out here that could close, and I don't think Chad Green will close this year. So I'm gonna take the guy who could close. I feel the same way about steals. It's like, yes, you can tell me, especially with the auction calculator, you can tell me that thanks to the auction calculator, this speed, this guy with no speed is gonna be like a top 5 hitter, and you should take him. But I stared at Max Muncy on the top of my draft board for rounds and rounds and rounds, and I don't feel that bad now for having not picked him as much. Who are some of the other guys? Remember, we had this conversation when we was talking about draft season.
The guys that run, that are
the guys that don't run, that were falling.
The don't run guys that fell. Yikes! There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Corey Seager's been that guy for a few years among early rounders. Doesn't steal any bases. Gets dinged for it.
I don't know. Running is also aside from the fact that you need steals in these leagues. Running is a marker for athleticism and youth, and tools. So like, if you got a whole team just full of plodding 3 true outcomers, I don't know. I guess maybe in head-to-head you could be punting steals, but I think it would be kind of a risky play for other reasons too, right?
I mean, so Yordan is 27th percentile in sprint speed, and it's the only offensive profile thing you can look at and say it's not amazing. It's bad. Sprint speed's bad given the knee concerns. I get it.
Right.
But they play him in the outfield enough for me to be a lot less worried about the knees than we were at the time that the surgeries happened.
That's true.
And then it's like, how do you not want a guy that's 99th percentile or 96th percentile or higher in walk rate, barrel rate, X slug, XBA, X WOBA, hard hit. All of it.
I'm not. You're not going to get me to say bad things about Yordan Alvarez.
That wasn't the challenge. I'm just like, what does he have to do for us to be like, wait a minute, what if he's better than Vlad Jr.?
Yeah.
Which isn't. I'm not trying to throw shade at Vlad Jr. What if he's just better? Previously, the DH discount and the knees were two things that held him back. He's not going to DH next year. He's going to have outfield eligibility. He already got that. I mean, this is probably a top 5 player.
Who did we pull out of the first round? We already pulled Bo Bichette out.
Bo's out. Yep.
And we're close to pulling Kyle Tucker out.
Bueller's out because of injuries.
Bueller's out. Yeah.
So there's 2.
But are we going to have a season next year where there's just fewer first round pitchers? That might be interesting. That might actually happen.
I don't know, because I would.
Or does it always? Is there always going to be 3? Is there always just going to be 3, no matter who it is? I think that we should be learning a lesson. If there's always going to be 3, and it's different ones every year. Come on, you know what I mean? Like, why are we doing this? Cole is going to be the only one who's going to stay in the top 3.
Let's see. Who's out of the first round? Trey Turner, no. Jose Ramirez, no. Juan Soto, no. Probably back in the first round. Bo Bichette, yes, out of the first round for now. Not way out, but out.
So we took 1 out.
Can take Vlad Jr. out of the first round?
No. Not if he's going to hit 40 and maybe get close to 280. No, I think Garrett Cole's the only. I think he's still the number 1 starting pitcher. I know other people have Shane McClanahan number 1, but I don't know. In terms of track record, if you take Bueller out and replace him by McClanahan, that's fine. That means we only have 1 person that we've taken out.
Shohei Ohtani still in the first round.
Is he doing something that would? I mean, it's always like, what's your setup?
Yeah, well, we're assuming NFBC for the purposes of this conversation.
Maybe. I think that people who own Shohei Ohtani and NFBC are annoyed with him.
He's on pace to go 36-16 with a 262 average and over 100 RBIs and 94 runs.
Maybe not that annoyed with
him. I've got him in a league. I'm not bothered.
As just a hitter.
Just as a hitter. I never throw him as a pitcher. I may have to in that league, though.
I think he could be a back end one, but I think he's probably still in.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing him getting bounced.
So we've cut 1 because Bueller replaced by McClanahan.
Harper?
He was kind of borderline. He's not going to drop far, but I could see him dropping kind of to where Mookie was coming into last season, just because of the injury.
So maybe out just because he's like the first one out because other people get nudged ahead of him, and not out because
there's 3 pitchers. Like he would be a first round bat if it was all bats, I think.
Okay, Corbin Burns still there.
But we had 3 first round pitchers last year, so Burns just replaces the other one, I guess.
Burns is already in it. He was 9th last year, so he's still there.
Just keep him in there.
Tucker, we should look at Tucker. We've mentioned him 3 or 4 times, and it sounds like he's
give me his return value, because I'm intrigued. Because at 260, 16, 14, I'm not like he's the best hitter on my labor squad, which is out in front by 30 points.
But maybe everybody else is doing the real heavy lifting.
What's the earned value for Tucker?
What do you think it is in a 15-teamer? Using the RotoWire calculator.
Top 20 at least, but maybe not top 10.
It's $33. He's 5th among outfielders and among all players. Yeah, it's inside the top 20. I think it's even borderline top 10. 6, 9, 13. Yeah. So you're not really taking him out of the first round.
And he could be doing better going forward. Like, he had a real bad beginning.
Acuña is still in. He was a late first rounder by the end of draft season.
Mm-hmm.
Trout, does he come out?
Yeah.
Now you're thinking. Yeah, you're thinking again.
Because he's not stealing bases.
He's $31. He probably becomes an early second rounder.
Yeah.
So Trout's a slight drop.
Yeah.
All right. So we're taking Trout out too. Trout's out.
So we got two batters out. We can replace 2 batters.
Rafael Devers.
Was he in?
He was.
Well, I think he stays in. What's his earn
Still in.
value?
$36. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's still in. Bueller's out.
Jose
And Martinez.
Martinez was in. I mean, Jose
Ramirez
Ramirez
was
was
in.
in.
Yep, easy. Yep,
And he
easy
stays
in.
in. So we got 2 guys we can replace, and we're advocating. I forget who we were advocating for last time, but Yordan Alvarez is one.
Yordan goes up for sure. Julio Rodríguez goes up.
I think Witt's probably like a second rounder.
I agree. I think Witt's a second rounder. Healthy Tatis is going to probably be in there too. See, someone else is going to have to come out. This isn't going to work.
Ooh, Tatis replaces Bichette. Alvarez replaces Harper. Julio Rodriguez goes at the turn.
So Rodriguez could take Luis Robert's spot at 15.
Yeah, there you go. That's actually pretty good. That makes some sense.
Someone might double up with both of those players. That might be a 1-2 turn just to go.
One thing that does, I have done something like that in some of my NFBC teams though, and one thing that is annoying is there's so much late value in the outfield that when you go bang bang outfield at the beginning, you might be getting great stats, but at the end you'll be like, "Grr, I'm taking like a late middle infielder," when I wish I could be taking a late outfielder.
Yeah, and I found chasing speed too. You like to be able to do that from the outfield because you seem to find more bags from that group of players. So.
But how can you complain with a possible 60-60 from your first 2 guys, you know?
The most fun 60-60 you can imagine for 2023.
Kind of a wild ride though too, especially with Luis Robert's injuries. You're just like anytime he's like chased the ball down the outfield, like no, let it go. Let it go, Luis.
We're not obsessing only with the first round in the future. I'm curious how much you would bump up Jazz Chisholm based on what we've seen so far. We've got improvements in O-swing percentage, walk rate, and ground ball rate. I would look at him maybe more. You mentioned Witt as a second rounder. I think Jazz and Witt could be comparable in terms of our expectations for next year. So you think Jazz creeps up into the top 30?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit like Carlson where you're like, oh, you're doing all the things that I want you to do over time. The question with O-swing is it's generally better this year. His chase rate is generally better this year. He had a spike in the middle of the year where it was as bad as it ever was last year. But he then returned back to a lower rate. So I think that's just the process of getting better. It's like you are great and then you get kind of overconfident or like, you know, or they find some little thing that they can pick at you, some new thing that they're picking at you, and you kind of revert a little bit to what you did before. It's like when we're trying to do something better, like eat fewer chips or drink less beer, you know, like, you know, they're like, you're doing good. You've changed some stuff. And then family's in town. You're just super stressed out. You just eat all the chips and drink all the beer. And you're like, no.
That sounded very personal. It didn't sound very hypothetical. That sounded like a true story.
I don't know what family was in town in the middle of the season for Jazz Chisholm, but there is a spike. No, I think this is why there is a weird thing that's true of prospects, which is that high strikeout, low walk prospects still have a higher exceed number than you think. They have the highest bust rate of any prospects, but they also have this like weird, some superstars came out of that bucket.
Sure.
You know? And I think Jazz Chisholm shows you why, because if you are going to continue to advance in the minor leagues, despite, you know, a poor walk rate and a poor strikeout rate, it's because you have a great defense. A little bit like what we were talking about earlier, right? It's because you have great defense and you have great power. And Chisholm has showed us those things all the way through. You know, great, I guess it comes in quotation marks because I don't know. You think they're going to move him to shortstop next year?
Seems reasonable. Is Rojas still under contract though? I think
it might be one more year.
Miguel Rojas's contract always has an extra year. There's always a sequel. It's like an Air Bud movie.
There's always another one.
Always another one. Yeah, 2023. He's already signed for next year. I mean, they could just play him as a reserve, like
move him to second and move Birdie in and out with him. Yeah. Anyway, I would say he has great defense from the eye test. He's always had the great power. Now he's kind of refining his plate approach. Again, like this isn't a character that I want at 29 and 30. And there's some Javier Baez-esque facets to his game. No,
I would agree that there are some similar concerns, but the biggest difference for me is that we really never saw Baez walk as
even
much as we've seen
9% of
that
the time.
from
Yeah,
Chisholm. Like that, there's always been a gap with that. So I think
yeah,
there's a better floor as a result of that. Because he
yeah,
runs and being able to get on base when you run is huge. There's so many guys that could steal bases but can't get on base enough to even do it. And
yeah.
that's not a problem for Jazz.
And the nice thing about Witt and Jazz being there in the second round is that if you do want to go pitcher or Yordan Alvarez or Vlad in the first round, there might be a really nice middle infielder with speed waiting for you. You know, you still have to do more work. You don't just pick Jazz Chisholm and pat yourself on the back and say I got all the steals I need, but if you paired Witt or Chisholm with Yordan in particular, I think you would come out with a nice batting average, a good deal of power, and still 25 plus steals.
And speaking of Witt, right now it's 11 homers, 12 steals, a 233, 284, 435 line. I think the reason why I'm saying top 30 back around 2 is possible or likely for him is because if you take out the first month that he was in the big leagues, it looks like Witt has already made the adjustments. That forecast is my way of saying that what we've seen from May on from Witt is what I expect to see over the next 3 months of the season. And once we tack on 3 more months of what we've had like the last 2, then we're looking at a guy that's going to probably hit 255, 260 by season's end with a 320, 330 OBP, something close to that range, and then 2020 plus in that range. Like that's the type of player I think he's going to end up being. And I just think it's kind of like early career Ozzy Albies, where you look at it just in terms of the roto production and say, yeah, there's a couple flaws for a young player, but zero risk of playing time concerns. Place in the lineup is really secure. And there's enough good here where we think he's going to fix the flaws along the way and continue to make value. And I'm saying that as someone who was skeptical of Witt at his 2022 price. I think the people who were on him at that price are being proven right, and people like me are being proven wrong.
Yeah, I don't know that it was bad.
I think it was good process. I think it was perfectly fine process. I'm not abandoning my process as a result of being wrong.
But
I
it
think
is
something to
worth
accept.
thinking about top 5 type prospects, top 3 type prospects in a different bucket, right? And just different. There's different bust rates. There's different possible outcomes, and he's showing us. I wouldn't even say this is an amazing, top end outcome for him. He's showing us one of the better outcomes for a rookie. But one of my favorite things to do on Fangraphs is they have these rolling graphs. And, I know they don't have bail rate on there, but they do have chase rate and they do have fly ball rate. I use fly ball rate as a bit of a proxy for power and for barrel rate, just because I want to see them lift the ball. It's hard sometimes for a young guy to lift the ball, and generally over time you actually add fly balls as you age. So, if you look at some of these, I had a couple names that I added to the rundown, and we talked too much and the show's almost over, so I better just throw them out there. Christopher Morel and Jack Sawinski, I think, are really interesting. And these are not guys that are going to move into the second or whatever, but they are guys that are playing their way up the board as we speak, and we were all watching them trying to see how much we're going to believe them next year. What are they going to do? If you look at their chase rate and fly ball rates, and then you put it next to Bobby Witt's, you see more sustained good behaviors from Witt over time. And you see with Morel actually, and with Sawinski, spikes even in chase rate as they've gone on in the season. Definitely not great improvement. And so that's why Witt is a superstar in the making and probably as high as a second rounder next year. And Morel and Sawinski are guys that are going to be working on stuff may only hit 230 or whatever. But I do really like their barrel rate. They were both in the top 50 for last month barrel rate. Here comes my pop quiz hot shot.
Oh, no.
Who leads the league in barrel rate over the last 30 days?
Did you give it away? Is it Jack Sawinski?
No. I haven't said that.
You
The
haven't said
name
the
has
name
been
yet.
said.
Oh, the name has been said.
But not just now in that little bit that I was talking.
Well, it's probably Yordan.
Nope. Luke Voigt.
Oh, Luke Voigt. Yeah, I did come out. I did mention him very early on. You're right.
So the reason why I will, with a lower pick and with less investment in dynasty leagues, and won't treat as untouchable and amazing, the reason why I will go after guys like Morel and Swinsky is a little bit Voigt, where it's like, hey, you can actually hit the ball hard enough to overcome some flaws.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it almost circles around on the conversation we've been having the whole way through.
It's the Mountcastle question. I think it's like when Ryan Mountcastle requires a, I don't know, fringe top 100 overall pick, right? ADP probably somewhere in that range. I'm not really into that there, because I think there's other things you can get in that range that I like better.
But would I maybe love a little Morel and Sawinski off the waiver wire, or next year,
or pick 250 or pick 300,
100 rounds, 100 picks later? Yeah. So that's why I wanted to throw them out there. And then a big mover, because he was a different kind of. This is the very best kind of sleeper and mover that you want to see. If you've got a guy who walks and doesn't strike out and then ends up on the top 50 in barrel rate, you got to pay attention. Do you know who that is? He's on the rundown. You should be able to guess.
I'm going to guess Sawinski again.
No, Alejandro Kirk, dude. Swinsky strikes out too much.
Yeah, of course, Kirk.
Yeah, so I think Kirk, is Kirk playing himself into top 3 catcher status next year?
Certainly,
he makes
some pieces
tons
together
of contact.
Could be there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I have him in a league where I already have my 6 keepers, and I probably have 2 or 3 extra guys that could be keepers, and then I got Kirk, and I'm just like, what do I do here? Especially it's a league where strikeouts are a category. He's lovely.
We talked about Kirk as just one of the more unusual players really in the league a few weeks ago or last week. And he's basically, as a hitter, he's like Stephen Kwan, but he hits the ball hard. Like, well, that's really interesting, because if there's one thing you change about Stephen Kwan, you'd say, man, hit the ball harder. And plate skills wise, I mean, Kirk, double-digit walk rate, sub 10% K rate, 44.5% hard hit rate so far. Barrel rate continues to be in the double digits. I mean, he's playing really, really well.
Yeah.
And on pace right now to be a 5 to 6 WAR player too. So the real value he's providing to the Blue Jays is probably even higher than they expected.
What's his earned value among catchers?
Ooh,
it's got to be top 3. No,
it's got. I mean, he's $17.
Who's one? It's not Real Muto.
It's not Real Muto. Kind of an underrated player in the early rounds. Wilson Contreras.
That's right.
Catcher, I mean, this year, 20 for Wilson Contreras, 17 earned by Kirk, 15 for Varsho, 14 for Real Muto, 13 for Will Smith. I think Will Smith still could end up at the top of that leaderboard in the second half.
Yeah.
And then Darno and Jonah Heim, the other 2 catchers who've earned double digits so far in a 15-team mixed league. Jonah Heim's crushing it it was basically everyday duty when they had injuries. I think now it's a little less than that, but
he might get more playing time, because Mitch Garver said he has some sort of strained muscle in his forearm or something.
Yeah, he still managed to ruin Dean Kramer's start for me yesterday. So arm must be feeling better than terrible.
Oh man, you know what made me so angry? I got sleep in on Monday, and I bought Braxton Garrett because he was a 2-start starter in Barf, and their damn game started like 8:00 our time or something.
It's the same thing happened to me in a weekly league. I picked him up. I was going to throw him in for the 2-start week. and I went for a jog.
Oh, you were awake in time, and then you went for a jog.
I was awake, and I thought, wow, it sure would be good to go for a run. It's a holiday, and it'd be a good way to start the week off. Be a little healthier, eat a little less cheese, go for a run. So I go for a run, and I come back, and I pop open my laptop. I'm like, I'm going to make sure everyone's good. It's 9:30 in the morning. So games probably start at 10 today, 4th of July.
Why is he grayed out?
I'm like, oh, come on. Like, just a horrendous weekly league error. It's like, actually, this is still my first full year living out here. So the holiday baseball times are just not in sync in my head. My internal clock is not right.
I just wanted to sleep.
At least I was exercising.
That could really cost me in barf too, man. I could use extra strikeouts.
I needed the ratios in that league. That's one of the areas where I can make up a lot of standings points, and I went for a freaking jog instead. No standings points out there on the bike path, just to let everybody know. I looked, and I didn't find anything. Lots of squirrels, no standings points. One more player you put on the rundown that I think is kind of interesting, because he's obviously a big riser and someone that we're going to be talking about a lot in the second half of the season and probably through draft season next year, is Michael Harris in Atlanta. I mean, this is a situation where they just got Eddie Rosario back, so their outfield getting a little more crowded. That puts a little more pressure on him if he cools off at some point. So far, it's worked for Harris, despite a lot of swings at pitches outside the zone and a ground ball rate that's a bit higher than what he had at AA. Like, you can see warts, but
good max exit velo, good barrel rate.
We're talking about a guy who's 21 in his debut season, who has shown consistently good walk rates in the minors, doesn't seem to have a big strikeout problem in the minor league track record. I'd be really excited if I were a fan of this team and I saw Harris doing what he's doing so far, even as someone who's skeptical about how good the second half is going to be. He doesn't have to be great in the second half to keep regular playing time. If he's a good defender and takes quality at bats, he'll play a lot. And because he can hit for power and steal bases, he could be a good fantasy player even with short-term flaws.
Yeah, 100%. There's running out to make comparisons to Acuña, and he's not Acuña. He does not hit the ball. He does not barrel the ball as much. Does not hit the ball as hard. Hits the ball on the ground too often to be Acuña. But could he be a great player otherwise? I do believe it. I think next year, you could do a projection for him next year where he hits 260 with 20 homers and 25 steals.
I kind of think there's more of a Starling Marte profile here because of the ground balls and the speed,
low walk rate, low strikeout rate. Yeah,
that's more of like the fantasy comp that I would see for someone like Harris, just based on the early ground.
The one thing he'd have to do is to be Starling Marte is steal a lot more bases.
I mean, look at the success rates in the minors, though. 27 for 31 at high A last year in 101 games. He was 11 for 14 at AA in 43 games. That's the future of maybe a 20 to 30 steal guy pretty easily. If the OBPs hold and if the organizational philosophy continues to allow players to run as much as they want, they seem like a team that lets guys run.
Mm-hmm.
All their great young players have come up and been able to steal bases. So
Acuña off of the injury, so.
Yeah, because I'm looking back at young Starling Marte, and that was one of the critiques people had about Marte. They've always had that. He hits the ball on the ground a lot. Mm-hmm. It was always a limitation to his power.
But he hits them hard. 113 max exit velo is not nothing. We were saying Dylan Carlson doesn't really. He has 108. 108 is a little bit the dividing line.
Yeah, looking way back. Starling Marte minor league numbers, also young for the level when he played at AA as a 22-year-old back in 2011. 332, 370, 500, 17.5% K rate, 3.8% walk rate. So Harris walked more
than that.
Strikes out about the same. Hit the ball on the ground a little less than Marte did. Raw power, yeah, I think there's a difference there, but not that much. 12 homers in 129 games. That was with Altoona for Marte, and then 5 and 43 for Harris. So I think that's probably the direction he's going based on current players in the pool we're really excited about. If you're trying to get a ceiling for Michael Harris, that's a pretty good ceiling because Starling Marte has been an early round pick for a long time.
Yeah. It's super exciting. Michael Harris is super exciting, and how quickly they moved him through just speaks to their belief in him.
Yeah, they like the way he prepares. They like a lot of things about how Michael Harris has cruised through their minor league system so far. A couple of quick things I wanted to get to because this has been in the rundown for a little while now, and I know we're running a little long, but we'll fly through this. Trading for injured players. There's a specific question from Mark on the rundown. He's currently in first place. He was wondering if you should trade Taylor Ward, a healthy Taylor Ward, now to get Bryce Harper for a late season playoff run. That's a head-to-head league. I would do it. If you're cruising in to first place, you know you're going to make the playoffs. I'd rather have the upgrade later. Taylor Ward's been good. I think Taylor Ward, a lot of this breakout might be sustainable, but if we're not talking about getting this upgrade now, like what are we doing here? Like you want that. You want a top 10 player later if you can get one.
Yeah, the only issue I have with it is that you're dealing for a perceived upside, and then their play could be affected by the injury even as they come back.
Right. If Harper comes back and he's not himself, okay.
There are setbacks. He's not currently healthy. So you're taking a swing.
Definitely a short-term hit, kind of nursing that spot without Harper, because Ward's good. Like, Ward's playing really well, but I think if you feel good about getting to the playoffs, it's something worth doing. I think this is the hard thing that people have had to figure out with Jacob deGrom in a lot of leagues. Like, should you really have been trading for him in the past month? Should you be trading for him right now? Should you expect a guy to come back and be himself? And generally, I feel like you need to take a little off the projection for any type of injury. For Harper, it's a thumb injury. Like the elbow, we're not worried about the elbow because he was already playing at a really high level with that. But is the power all going to be there? I think you expect 80 to 90% of Harper instead of everything that's projected for him. For deGrom, what are you expecting from deGrom once he actually gets back? I know he started as a rehab assignment and was basically striking everybody out. Still going to be a few weeks.
Through 100.
Yes, but are you getting 80% of what you expected from Jacob deGrom once he's actually back?
I don't know. I think it's more like 100% went in. It's just a question of, does he grab something else and go back down?
Right. How much playing time do you actually get? Oh, you're gonna get the Jacob deGrom, but you're gonna get him for half as many innings as you're expecting.
I think there's a risk there. He's had setbacks from setbacks. He's been ready to go and then not. So he could make it to the big leagues, throw 2 starts, and say, "Oh, something's not right yet."
Yeah, just 92 innings last year. Hopefully he comes back and is himself. Here's how I'm looking at it. I have not traded for deGrom anywhere. I'm not trying to trade for deGrom anywhere. I need pitching in mixed out. I need to find a way to close the gap in ERA and WHIP. He'd be a great fit. And
But he's also going to cost so much, right? I mean, even with the injuries, nobody's going to give you a break on Jacob deGrom.
No, I would have to give up, I think, probably Xander Bogaerts or like a $25 hitter to get deGrom back. And if I'm giving up that kind of hitter, why would I not just trade for Giolito or Woodruff or someone else who's comparable? Yeah, take the lesser pitcher who's currently healthy as opposed to trying the ceiling guy that
currently injured pitchers I'm not into. Currently injured position players, I could see it. Yeah. And it might depend a little bit on the injury. I don't know. Like, what if you got a currently injured hitter that has been having hamstring issues all year? Like, what if they tore their hamstring? I don't want to be waiting around for that.
Well, it does depend on the injury a little bit, but generally trading for injured stars, not something I'd do. Head-to-head leagues especially, I'd be a little more inclined to do it because you're still probably going to get to the playoffs. In Roto, you could lose ground and then not be able to make it up later because every single
it doesn't make much sense in Roto. Yeah, just try to be always first.
Yeah, it's almost like consolidating in a keeper league when you're trading for the playoffs. Let's make sense of Triston McKenzie, or at least try to. Had a 2-start week this past week. First start against Minnesota did not go well. Second start against the Yankees did actually go pretty well, but he's been pretty disappointing. A lot of home run issues, and obviously the weather in Cleveland. We've talked about that a couple of times. It's going to play a lot more hitter friendly this time of year than it did earlier in the year. Do you see anything in the underlying numbers of Triston McKenzie that gives you some confidence that he can be the guy that he was in the second half of last season and in the first 6 to 8 weeks of this season? Really seemed like mid-May was about the time that the home runs started to come back and really start to bite Triston McKenzie.
Yeah, I think think what's going on here is that he's throwing harder. He's throwing closer to his maximum, and it's costing him command. And so you'll see that his maximum has not really changed. His max velo has been around 95, forever, but he's closer to 93 now, sitting. When he first came up, it was like 90, 91 in last year. So I think by throwing closer, he's improving his stuff, and his stuff numbers, from start to start are fine. They're good. He's consistently putting up 105s, 104s, especially in the last 6 starts. He's been above 105 in 5 of them. So that part's good. It's the command that goes up and down. He has starts where he's, early in the season, he had more starts where he was above 100 in command and below 100 in stuff. So it's like he's ending up as a very mercurial kind of up and down pitcher for different reasons. But the stuff is getting better generally. I like most of his team situation. I think, and what's funny is, what I would do if I had McKenzie is start him in that first start and not in that second one.
Well, that's last week. Yeah, if you could play the matchups last week, I would have been out because I had to use them in weekly leagues. It ended up working out kind of okay or fine, but it was really disheartening to see the easier of the two matchups go as sideways as it did for Triston McKenzie. Weird that he's had both flaws though, and if he puts it all together, you might get that prolonged stretch where he's a low 3s ERA guy with a good whip again, because the ingredients are all there. Got a question from John about Brian Bayo, who's going to come up and start for the Red Sox. I believe that's on Wednesday. And curious if he compares to like Daniel Espino and some of the other top end prospects that have been discussed frequently in the minor leagues.
I don't know that much about him. Just that he it's the great changeup, right? I think that's his deal. He's got a 60 changeup. I know that I personally have a little bit of a bias against changeup pitchers.
You want a breaker, like a really good breaking ball, ideally for the swings and misses. And I think for me,
he's been getting good strikeout rates, but if you look at his whiff rates, the whiff rates are insane, and the strikeout rates are good. You might see something similar in the big leagues.
I think the bigger question, though, has been command for Bayo. The slider is supposed to be about as good as the changeup based on the Fangraphs scouting grades, and home run rate hasn't been a problem for him in the minor leagues. I wonder if that'll be an issue with the command problems in the big leagues, and then if the walk rate goes up, he's in more trouble.
This is one of the lower. They have a 30-40 command grade on him at Fangraphs, and he's never had a walk rate over 4/9.
Right. It's kind of strange, isn't it?
Yeah. This be something to watch. I mean, listen, no one has to yell at the radio. I understand that command is not just walk rate. I'm just saying that it's, usually they line up. I mean, he had seasons where he didn't even walk 3/9. So, and a couple, and well, those are smaller sample, but a couple seasons where he didn't even walk 2/9. So, yeah, this is. I think it's gonna be fun. What I do have a bias towards, and this is kind of interesting. I have a bias towards changeup pitchers in terms of watchability. Like I think there's almost nothing so awesome as a changeup that has a ton of movement, because it just seems so almost unnatural. It comes out of the hand, and instead of going, glove side, we're just like, okay, that makes sense in my brain. Like a great changeup just veers off arm side. It's just like super improbable, and it's super crazy looking, I think. So I love watching good changeups. I'm definitely going to watch his debut. I don't know that. Like, people are asking me if they should drop established starters that are pitching well, and I'm just like, no, I don't think so. You can drop a streamer. You can drop a back end guy. Like, would you drop a Tyler Anderson for him?
No, because I don't think Bayo is necessarily permanent. for them.
Yeah, that
They've got a
too.
lot of guys coming back, including Sale, and I just think
Sale's back soon.
a lot of the Red Sox young starters that have been filling in could end up in the bullpen. Bayo could be one of them. They might see him as a multi-inning weapon that they can use to help bridge the gap between their starters and their bullpen arms. That could totally happen. But I think the reason Bayo doesn't come up in the same conversations as Grayson Rodriguez and Daniel Espino is that command grade. I think the other difference, though, is that even the best pitches in the arsenal of Rodriguez and Espino are higher graded pitches than Bayo's best pitches. So it's a little bit of both. So I think that's part of why he's been more in the second tier of pitching prospects. Doesn't mean he won't be good. I mean,
my top tier in the minors is Espino, Meyer, and Rodriguez.
And Yuri Perez for me is in that group. He's so young, 19 at AA.
I have a little bit more TrackMan movement knowledge about Meyer, Espino, and Grayson Rodriguez, so I always fall back on that a little bit.
But thanks for that question, John. Last player we're going to talk about today. Paul wants to know what we think of Harold Ramirez, who has been hitting in a prominent spot in the Rays order. And it's got first base outfield eligibility, so a little bit of flexibility in a lot of leagues. Is there something you see in Harold Ramirez that helps you understand why the Rays seem to like him so much and why he's starting to take away some playing time from a guy like Josh Lowe?
I wonder if he's got the defensive chops. So I wonder if it's really, something that I would want to do in center field. They are not playing him in center field, as you can tell from the sort of 1B/OF. There's the Cody Bellinger and almost nobody else is also playing center. So they are not using him in center, which I think that's why Josh Lowe has to play, is because they're out of center fielders.
They're playing Kiermaier in center again now too. I think Kiermaier being healthy,
injury?
Yeah, that's sort of left them to choose between Lowe and Ramirez in a corner, and I'm surprised they're not giving Lowe more chances, but Ramirez is producing. So
he's a win now. It's a win now situation, and if it's going to continue, then Lowe will go down. What they like about Ramirez is he has a plus hit tool. When they pick up guys like Paredes, right? When they pick up guys even like Arozarena strikeout rate is higher, but they have good hit tools, and they like guys who have good hit tools. And what's interesting about Harold Ramirez is he has this good hit tool, and then he has 115 max EV. So he's a little bit like Yandy Diaz, right? Guy who can put the ball in play, hits it really hard, and doesn't lift it.
Yeah,
it's a profile they like.
Yeah, a lot of well struck balls for Ramirez. I think just Rays doing Rays stuff, though, in terms of how frustrating it is if you're trying to see if Josh Lowe can provide bags for you. I think it's hard to break in when your playing time is up and down as Lowe's appears to be right now. And Vidal Brujan's like one level even below that right now. So you got to think a trade is happening in Tampa Bay. One of those guys, I think, is on the move as we get to the deadline. Thanks a lot for the great questions for today's show. You got a question for a future episode, drop us a note, rates and barrels at theathletic.com. Eno is at Eno Saris on Twitter. I'm at Derek Van Riper. And if you are listening to this podcast but do not have a subscription to The Athletic, you can get one for $1 a month for the first 6 months at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. We got a 3-0 show coming out on Thursday morning, and then Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.